It was pouring rain on a forgotten stretch of highway when a single dad spotted a little girl standing alone, holding a handmade sign that read, "Just a ride to save my mom." He had no idea that helping her would lead him straight into the past he thought he'd buried, and to the woman whose tears would change everything. Before we begin, if you believe in the power of kindness, second chances, and stories that stay with you long after the screen fades, consider subscribing. We share true-to-heart stories that remind us all sometimes one small act can echo forever. Now let me tell you what really happened that day. The rain was coming down hard on the I-89, turning the Vermont highway into a gray blur of headlights and windshield wipers. Ben Foster gripped the steering wheel of his beat-up Chevy Silverado, his calloused hands steady despite the slick road. It had been a long day, another job fixing a warped porch for a retiree who could only pay in monthly installments. He didn't mind. He wasn't in it for the money anymore. The truck's heater coughed warm air into the cabin, battling the damp chill that had settled into Ben's worn flannel. Outside, the world was soaked in melancholy, the kind of rain that didn't just soak your clothes, but your thoughts, your memories. As he passed the mile marker for exit 43, something flashed at the edge of his vision, a small figure, standing alone. Ben's eyes snapped to the shoulder of the road. There, huddled under a sagging backpack, was a girl no more than 10 or 11, soaked to the bone. Her blonde hair clung to her cheeks, and she held up a makeshift sign wrapped in clear plastic, written in thick black marker. He couldn't make out the words at first, but the desperation in her posture was enough. Without thinking, Ben eased the truck to the shoulder tires hissing on wet asphalt. He backed up slowly and rolled down the window. "Hey there," he called, gently, trying not to startle her. "You okay?" The girl took a cautious step toward the truck. Her lips were blue from cold, her jeans soaked to the knees. She lifted the sign higher. "I don't want your money. Just a ride. To save my mom." Ben stared at the words. Something clutched at his chest. He turned off the ignition, stepped out into the rain, and met her halfway. "I'm Ben," he said, kneeling a bit to meet her eyes. "What's your name, Lily?" she replied, her voice barely above the rain. "Lily," he repeated. "Where are you headed? To Delaney Communications," she said quickly. "They're hiring people to pass out flyers for their fundraiser. If I get the job, I can help pay for my mom's medicine." Ben blinked. The girl couldn't have weighed more than 70 pounds, and yet she stood there like a soldier on a mission. He looked again at the sign, then at the red sneakers on her feet, frayed, muddy, but scrubbed clean where she could manage. "Hop in," he said. "Let's get you warm first." Inside the truck, Lily pulled off her backpack and hugged it tightly in her lap. She didn't complain about the cold or the rain dripping from her sleeves. She just stared straight ahead. Ben turned up the heat and handed her the thermos of coffee he'd barely touched all day. "You're not supposed to take rides from strangers," he said, keeping his tone light. "But I'm glad you made an exception." She gave him a small, apologetic smile. "I wasn't going to. But your eyes looked kind." He swallowed hard at that. No one had said something that honest to him in years. As the truck rolled through the rain, Ben glanced at her out of the corner of his eye. "Tell me more about your mom." "She's in St. Agnes Hospital," Lily said, looking out the window. "She has stage 4 lung cancer. It's just the two of us. She worked at a diner before she got sick. I tried selling cookies outside the library last week. It didn't go well." There was no bitterness in her voice, just facts, like she'd learned that hope could be quieter than people thought. Ben tightened his grip on the steering wheel. He remembered nights pacing hospital hallways, watching machines breathe for the woman he loved, watching his daughter try to understand why Mommy wouldn't come home. "You said Delaney Communications?" he asked. Lily nodded. "They're on Main. Their fundraiser hires people to hand out flyers. They pay by the hour. It's not a lot, but..." Every hour could be a pill, or part of one. He admired her math, simple, raw, and heartbreaking. Ben glanced at the clock. "You'll make it on time," he said. "I'll make sure of it." When they reached the city limits, the rain softened into a steady drizzle. The mirrored glass tower of Delaney Communications stood ahead like a beacon, gleaming indifferent to the world below. Ben pulled up to the curb and shifted the truck into park. "You want me to wait?" Lily hesitated. "I don't know how long it'll take." "I've got nowhere else to be," he said with a reassuring nod. She gave him a grateful look and reached for the door. "Wait," he said. "Before you go." He handed her a dry napkin from the glove compartment and a pencil stub from his dashboard. "Just in case you need to write something down." Lily smiled a small, glowing smile that made her look both younger and braver than her years. She stepped into the rain again, her red sneakers splashing in the puddles, and walked through the glass doors like someone twice her size. Ben leaned back in his seat and exhaled. He picked up Lily's backpack, which she had left behind in her rush, and noticed a worn photograph sticking out of the side pocket. He slid it out carefully. It was a picture of Lily and her mother. They were sitting on a park bench. Her mother looked pale, her hair gone, but her eyes still bright as she wrapped an arm around her daughter. On the back, in faded ink, a message. "If you ever doubt, the world look down at your feet, and remember who loves you." Ben looked up. Through the misted glass of the building, he could just make out Lily's silhouette standing in front of a tall woman in a sharp suit. He didn't know what was about to happen, but something deep in his gut told him this wasn't the end of the road. It was the beginning. Ben Foster had never been the type to wait around. He wasn't impatient by nature. He was just a man raised to believe that time was best spent, doing not lingering. But here he was, parked along Main Street, watching droplets slide down the windshield in crooked rivers, waiting for a little girl he'd known for less than an hour. And he couldn't bring himself to drive away. He watched the doors of Delaney Communications slowly close behind Lily, her silhouette swallowed by the sleek, impersonal lobby. She looked so small, walking into a building so tall. But even through the rain-streaked glass, Ben could see the way her shoulders squared as she stepped forward, carrying purpose like armor. He leaned back in the seat, Lily's forgotten backpack sitting beside him. He should have followed her, at least made sure someone up there understood why she came. But a voice in his head, a voice that sounded suspiciously like his late wife Anna, said, "Don't hover. Let her be strong." Still, it was hard. Ben's eyes drifted to the photograph he'd found in the side pocket. Lily and her mother, cheek to cheek. A rare moment of joy captured between battles with medicine and exhaustion. The writing on the back of the photo echoed in his mind. "If you ever doubt the world, look down at your feet and remember who loves you." He glanced toward the building again. Lily's shoes, those red sneakers, had soaked through the moment she stepped onto the asphalt. But she'd kept walking steady, sure, like her mother had taught her to be. 20 minutes passed, maybe more. Ben's fingers drummed lightly on the steering wheel. It wasn't impatience. It was that restless ache that came when the heart had too much to carry and nowhere to put it. He opened the glove box and took out an old half-filled notepad. Scribbled inside were repair estimates, supply lists, and the occasional grocery reminder written by his daughter Maddie years ago in crayon. He tore out a clean sheet. "Dear Delaney Communications. If you're reading this, it means Lily made it inside safely. She's brave, smarter than most adults I know, and she's not asking for a handout, just a chance. If you give it to her, you won't regret it. She won't let you." He signed it simply, Ben Foster. And then paused. He folded the note and tucked it inside Lily's backpack next to the photograph. She deserved to be seen for the extraordinary little soul. She was not dismissed because of her size or age or shoes. Inside the building, Lily stood in front of the reception desk, clutching a soggy envelope with both hands. The receptionist, a woman named Karen, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense tone, looked over her glasses. "Honey, are you lost?" "No, ma'am," Lily said. "I'm here for the part-time flyer job, the one for the fundraiser." Karen blinked. "You came alone?" Lily hesitated. "Yes, ma'am." Karen glanced behind Lily, as if expecting a parent to materialize from the glass doors, but no one came. Before she could ask another question, Lily opened the envelope and placed the sheet inside on the desk. Her handwriting was uneven, but legible, printed carefully in pencil. "I can work afternoons and weekends. I don't have a phone, but I always check email at the library. I don't have a resume, but I have purpose. And I will never give up." Karen didn't speak right away. She looked at the girl, then the note. Then quietly she picked up the phone. Ben saw the elevator lights change and leaned forward in his seat. A tall woman in a gray blazer had just stepped out with long strides. She looked like someone who had lived most of her adult life in corner offices, composed, sharp, efficient. Claire Delaney, CEO. But when Claire stepped outside into the rain, her gaze wasn't distant. It was searching. She spotted the truck. Ben stepped out, unsure why heart quickening. Claire approached her heels, clicking against the pavement, until the rain softened their echo. She stopped a few feet from him. "You're Ben?" she asked. He nodded. "Lily's with you." "She's upstairs. She said you brought her here." "I did." Claire studied him. Her face was unreadable until her eyes drifted to the backpack in his hand. She told me everything Claire said, about her mom, about the shoes, about why she came. "She's something else," Ben murmured. Claire nodded slowly. "She is." Then, unexpectedly, her voice cracked. "She reminded me of someone I used to be." Ben said nothing. But in the quiet between them, something softened. Back upstairs, Lily sat in a conference room with warm tea in her hands and a towel over her shoulders. Claire had insisted. "You know," Claire said, "not many people your age or mine know what purpose feels like." Lily looked up. "Is it always supposed to feel this heavy?" Claire smiled through the mist in her eyes. "Yes, but that's what makes it real." Back downstairs, Ben stared at the wet sidewalk. He hadn't expected any of this. Claire turned to leave but stopped. "Mr. Foster." He looked up. "Do you have somewhere to be right now?" He shook his head. "Good. Because I think Lily's going to need more than a ride home." Ben didn't smile, but something in his face relaxed the way the sky does when a storm passes. He watched Claire walk back into the building, and he knew this day was no accident. It was a crossing of paths, a convergence of wounds and kindness, of old pain and new hope. He looked at the photo again. The words came back. "Look down at your feet and remember who loves you." He looked down. Rain-soaked boots, next to a pair of red sneakers waiting in a lobby. Maybe purpose wasn't about big dreams or long-term plans. Maybe it was just about showing up for someone at the exact moment they needed you most. The rain had eased into a steady drizzle by the time Lily stepped back into the truck, the towel still draped over her shoulders. Her cheeks were flushed, eyes wide, but not with fear. Something else was there now. A quiet light. Ben started the engine but didn't shift into gear. "You okay?" he asked. Lily nodded, hugging her backpack to her chest. "I think so. The lady, Ms. Claire, she said she'd call me tomorrow. She didn't promise anything, but she listened." Ben glanced at her. "Listening's half the battle in this world." Lily gave him a soft smile, but her eyes betrayed how tired she really was. She'd held it together in the building, stood strong, spoken clearly. But now that the storm was behind her, the weight of everything began to show. Ben reached behind the seat and pulled out an old blanket. "It's clean." Maddie used to wrap up in it on long rides. Lily accepted it gratefully. Thank you. The cab of the truck grew quiet again, the kind of quiet that feels safe rather than awkward. Ben adjusted the rearview mirror, but he wasn't watching the road. His eyes drifted down to the sneakers on Lily's feet. They weren't just worn, they were nearly threadbare. The soles had peeled slightly near the toes, and the once bright red canvas had faded to the color of rust, except for a few places where Lily had clearly scrubbed them. A piece of duct tape was wrapped around the left heel. "I like your shoes," Ben said gently. Lily looked down as if seeing them for the first time. "They're old," she admitted. "But they still fit. They belonged to your mom once." No, Lily shook her head. "She bought them for me when I turned 7. They were the only new thing I had that year." She said, "Every strong girl needs something that reminds her of where she started." Ben let that settle between them. "She told me whenever I feel small, I should look down at my shoes and remember I've already walked through worse." He didn't know what to say to that, because it was perfect and painful. He remembered Maddie years ago standing in the doorway of their old house, crying because Anna was too weak to come out of the bedroom. He remembered tying her little sneakers, then pretending they gave her super speed just to make her laugh. Ben cleared his throat. "I think your mom's right." They stopped at a diner on the edge of town, one of those old places, with neon signs that flickered and waitresses who remembered your name. Lily's face lit up at the sight of warm lights and dry seats. Inside, they slid into a booth near the window. A waitress named Doris, mid-60s with silver curls and sharp eyes, softened by kindness, walked over. "Evening, Ben. You bringing angels in from the rain?" Now Ben chuckled. Only the very persistent ones. Doris gave Lily a once-over, then smiled. "You want pancakes, sweetie? We got a special on blueberry." Lily nodded, her voice small but sure. "Yes, please." As they waited, Ben found himself watching Lily, not as a stranger anymore, but as someone who just appeared. Like a page from a book he'd forgotten he once read. "You believe in signs?" he asked her. "Like road signs?" He laughed. "No, like when things happen that feel too perfect to be just chance." Lily thought for a moment. "Sometimes I think God hides clues in the hard stuff, but not everybody slows down enough to notice." Ben leaned back in the booth, staring out the rain-specked window. That sounded exactly like something Anna would have said. Doris brought the food. Pancakes for Lily, black coffee for Ben. Lily ate like she hadn't tasted real food in days, and Ben didn't say a word, he just let her be. Halfway through, Lily looked up suddenly. "You miss her, don't you?" Ben blinked. "Who, your wife?" The words cut cleaner than expected, but not in a cruel way. More like a child stating what is, because they haven't yet learned how to soften truth. He nodded slowly. "Every day." Lily looked back down at her plate. "I think that's kind of beautiful. Missing someone means you still remember how to love them." Ben swallowed hard. "You're a wise kid, Lily," she shrugged. "My mom says the world teaches you fast if you're paying attention." He looked down at her red sneakers again, soaking slightly beneath the booth table. They weren't just shoes. They were armor. Memory. Love. Later, as they approached the hospital, the clouds had parted just enough for the moon to show through washed-out silver behind veils of mist. Ben parked by the curb. "Want me to walk you in?" Lily shook her head. "I'm okay." She paused, then added, "But thank you for everything today." He reached into the back seat, pulled out an old shoebox and handed it to her. "I was going to throw these out next spring cleaning," he said. "But something tells me they've got a little more walking left in them." Lily opened the box. Inside was a pair of bright red sneakers, not new, but clean, strong, sturdy. Her size. She didn't say anything for a long second. Then softly, "I'll still keep these," she said, nodding to the old ones on her feet. But I'll wear these when I'm building new memories. Ben smiled, eyes misted. Good plan. She leaned forward and did something that startled him. She hugged him, quick and fierce. Don't forget to look at your feet too, Mr. Ben, she said. You're still walking too. And just like that, she slipped out of the truck and disappeared into the warm light of the hospital doors. Ben sat in the truck a long time, the shoebox lid still open beside him. He looked down. His boots, wet and worn, were still steady on the pedals, still carrying him forward. He exhaled. Then he smiled. Morning broke with a slate-gray sky hanging over downtown Burlington, the kind that promised rain without ever fully delivering it. The streets were still damp from the night before, and the city wore the hush of early autumn, the lull between the bustle of college students and the long breath before winter. Claire Delaney stood by her office window on the 25th floor of the Delaney Communications Tower, sipping black coffee that had long since gone cold. The steam had faded, but her thoughts hadn't. She had barely slept. Lily's face had haunted her all night, not because of pity, but because of memory. The girl hadn't come in begging or manipulating. She had walked into Claire's domain, towering ceilings, sleek chrome, and the scent of lavender air fresheners, and offered nothing but truth. And those shoes, those red, soaking wet sneakers. Claire had kept them in her vision even as Lily sat across from her, clutching a towel and answering questions like a grown-up, holding a resume she couldn't afford to print. I don't have a phone, but I check email at the library. If I get the job, I'll walk here after school and stay till dark. My mom calls me stubborn. I call it hopeful. Claire's carefully guarded walls had cracked under the weight of every sentence. But it wasn't until she saw Lily's feet that something inside her truly shifted. Back in her office now, Claire turned from the window and walked to her bookshelf, the one that held nothing decorative, only a row of leather-bound strategy manuals and one dusty shoebox tucked in the corner. She reached for it like one might reach for an old scar, cautiously with reverence. Inside was a pair of children's red sneakers, just like Lily's, a bit brighter, untouched by mud. They were too small for Claire to have worn past the age of 9, but she remembered vividly the day she'd gotten them. The winter had been brutal. Snow piled high against the house, and the roof above her bedroom had caved under the weight. Her mother had panicked, crying cold, desperate. Claire had tried to be brave, but all she could remember was the wet ceiling tiles and the biting wind coming through the beams. Then a man had shown up. His name. She didn't remember, but his eyes were kind. He didn't ask for money, just picked up his tools and fixed the roof. And before he left, he handed her a box. "You'll need these," he'd said. "Because you're going places, kid. Red sneakers." She had worn them until the soles peeled and her toes cramped. Then she kept them as proof someone believed in her once. And now, here she was running a company commanding respect, dressing in tailored suits and heels, while a little girl named Lily walked into her office wearing those shoes again. Not literally, but symbolically. The same courage, the same desperation, the same fire. Claire sat down at her desk and pulled up the employee files for the flyer campaign. The list was full college students, mostly part-time hires from an agency. Still, her hand hovered over the keyboard. She doesn't have credentials, her assistant had murmured yesterday. She doesn't have a safety guardian or working papers yet. Yes, all true. But what Lily did have was purpose. And in Claire's experience, purpose beat credentials every time. She minimized the screen and stared out the window again, then picked up her phone. Across town, Ben stood in front of a workbench in his garage, sanding the edge of a custom-built bookshelf. It was for a single mom he knew from the community center, a gift for her little boy who loved animals. He was carving tiny wooden foxes into the side panels. His phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. He wiped his hands, picked it up, and hesitated. He rarely answered numbers he didn't know. But something nudged him. He hit accept. Ben Foster speaking. Mr. Foster, a voice replied. Calm, confident female. This is Claire Delaney. He paused. The woman from Delaney Communications. Yes, I met Lily yesterday. I understand you brought her in. I did. There was a beat of silence. Then she left something behind. A note, tucked in her backpack. I found it this morning. Ben nodded to himself. She's good at saying what matters. She is, Claire said softly. So are you. Your words. They meant something to me. Ben's voice was quiet. I just told the truth. Claire hesitated. I was wondering if you and Lily might come back today. I'd like to talk. Properly. And I'd like to meet her mother. Ben's chest tightened. Her mom's in St. Agnes. Room 212. I know, Claire replied. I already called the hospital. I'd like to visit. Ben said nothing for a moment. Then quietly, we'll be there by noon. That afternoon, as they walked the hospital corridor, Claire carried the old shoebox in one hand and a bouquet of tulips in the other. Ben walked beside her. Lily, skipping a half step ahead, her old red sneakers squeaking softly against the linoleum. When they reached room 212, Lily opened the door and tiptoed inside. Her mother, pale and thin, lay sleeping under warm blankets. Machines beeped steadily around her. Claire followed slowly the scent of antiseptic, meeting her like an old memory. She placed the tulips in the vase by the window, then turned to Lily's mother. I don't know if you can hear me, she said softly, but I want you to know, your daughter is extraordinary. And she reminded me of who I used to be. She placed the shoebox down on the bedside table. She's going to change the world, just like you did, the moment you gave her those shoes. Ben stood in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes shining. And in that quiet hospital room surrounded by beeping machines and sleeping breath, something unspoken passed between them all. Not just admiration, recognition. A circle quietly closing and just beginning again. Claire Delaney had built her life like she built her company, floor by floor, boundary by boundary, all glass and steel and high expectations. From the outside, her world sparkled. Success, wealth, power. From the inside, it was orderly, controlled, efficient, and often lonely. That morning, as she stepped out of the elevator into her executive suite, Claire carried something foreign in her hands, the shoebox. She placed it gently on the polished table in her office, between a stack of marketing reports and a French press she hadn't touched. She sat down slowly, her movements deliberate. The red sneakers inside the box weren't just a memory anymore. They were a mirror. And for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid to look. She thought of Lily's voice from yesterday, clear, unshaken, as if the girl had learned courage before she'd learned multiplication tables. I don't have a resume, but I have purpose. Claire had read that line over and over. Even in the world of business where strategy ruled and data reigned, there were moments when purpose cut through all the noise. This was one of them. At noon, sharp a knock came at her office door. Come in, she said. Ben stepped in first, holding the door open for Lily, who wore a different sweatshirt this time, but still the same red sneakers. Claire smiled at the sight of them. Lily grinned. You said you wanted to talk. Claire gestured toward the small sitting area by the window. I did, and I'm glad you came back. They all sat. The air was quiet, but not tense, more like a pause before music. Claire turned to Lily first. I have something I want to show you. She reached into the shoebox and carefully lifted out the red sneakers, her own smaller and still remarkably clean, their laces, tied in neat bows. Lily's eyes widened. You had a pair too, Claire nodded. I was 8. Our roof collapsed in the middle of a snowstorm. We didn't have money to fix it, but a man came anyway. Fixed the whole thing. Before he left, he gave me these. Ben sat forward, eyebrows lifting. Claire met his eyes. You wouldn't remember, but it was you. Ben's breath caught. You came to our house after your last job of the day. I was crying because my room was full of snow. You didn't charge a dime. My mother tried to argue, but you just said, every kid deserves a roof that keeps out the sky. Then you gave me the shoes. Ben leaned back, stunned. I remember a girl with a blue winter hat, big eyes, brave. Claire smiled, a little amazed. He remembered it all. That was me. Silence fell between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was reverent. I kept the shoes, Claire continued, because they reminded me that kindness builds more than homes. It builds people. Lily reached out, gently brushing the toe of Claire's old sneakers. So, does this mean I get the job? Claire laughed, the soundlight and unguarded. Not only that, she said. I want you to be part of something bigger. She turned to Ben. I've been thinking a lot since yesterday. About the fundraiser. About how disconnected it's become. It used to mean something, used to bring people together. Now it's just numbers on a report. Claire stood, walked over to her desk and pulled out a folder. Inside were photographs of past campaigns, old flyers, donor lists, sterile corporate. I want to bring heart back into it, she said. And I want Lily to help me do that. Not as a flyer girl, but as the face of a new campaign. Lily blinked. Me, you, Claire said. Because your story is the story of this community, of resilience, of purpose. Ben spoke up, voice cautious. That's a lot to ask of a 10-year-old. Claire nodded. It is, and I'll make sure she's supported every step of the way. But it won't just help us. It'll help her mom. We'll include a personal donation fund as part of the campaign. Medical costs, home support, whatever they need. Lily stared at her eyes glassy. You'd really do that? Claire's voice softened. Someone once did something for me when I needed it most. This is how I give that back. After a long pause, Lily stood and walked to the window. She looked down at the city below her, red sneakers reflected faintly in the glass. Okay, she whispered. Let's do it. Ben stood too, looking at both of them, the powerful CEO and the little girl with tape on her shoes, and something inside him shifted. Not everything had to be lost to time. Sometimes, the things you gave away, the kindness, the shoes, the roof over a stranger's head circled back when you least expected them. Claire turned to him. I'll need your help too. My help. Not just as her ride, as someone who knows how to build things that last. Ben gave a small, surprised laugh. Well, I can swing a hammer. Claire smiled. That's a start. As they left her office, Lily clutched the shoebox with Claire's old sneakers in one hand and her own worn ones still on her feet. Ben walked beside her, quieter than usual, as if measuring the change that had quietly taken root between them all. Claire watched them go, her hand still resting on the doorframe. For years, she'd built her empire upward, higher floors, bigger clients, taller expectations. But now, for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was building something deeper. Not just upward, but inward. Rain had always been a part of Claire Delaney's life. It fell the day her father left, the day her mother collapsed from exhaustion, the day she stood on a community college stage, accepting a scholarship she barely believed she deserved. It poured the night she signed her first lease, and again the day she signed the paperwork for the top floor of the glass tower that now bore her name. To her, rain wasn't just weather, it was memory. And for some reason, it always seemed to show up when life turned a page. That morning, it was raining again. Not heavily, just a soft, persistent drizzle that turned sidewalks silver and rooftops to mirrors. Claire stood under the canopy of St. Agnes Hospital, holding a paper coffee cup and watching Lily and Ben walk ahead of her through the sliding glass doors. They were back for a visit with Lily's mother, this time with good news. Claire had finalized the campaign that morning, Because I Care Stories of Strength, featuring Lily as its first face and voice. It would launch the following week with videos, interviews, a live-streamed fundraiser event, and most importantly, a companion fund to cover Lily's mother's treatment. All anonymous, no pity, just purpose. Lily had insisted on that. Inside room 212, the air smelled of sanitizer and lavender lotion. A small radio played low classical music, and tubes ran silently from IV bags to the pale hand of the woman in the bed. Lily placed her sketchbook gently on the table near her mother's pillow. She'd drawn a picture of herself holding a megaphone standing in front of a crowd, a little red heart on her chest. Above the scene, in uneven pencil strokes, Because I Care, I Speak. Claire stood at the foot of the bed, watching the rise and fall of the woman's chest. There was something hauntingly familiar in the woman's profile. The same softness around the eyes, the same quiet strength. She remembered her own mother in a hospital bed like this, worn down from years of surviving, but never breaking. The memory crept up her spine, like the chill of rainwater seeping into her collar. I know you don't know me, Claire said quietly, but I owe you something. Your daughter reminded me of who I used to be, and she's already teaching me who I still can be. She placed a hand lightly on the footboard. We're going to take care of things, not just today. Long term, because she deserves it. And so do you. Ben stood behind her, silent, a respectful distance away. But Claire could feel his presence like the comfort of a wool coat, solid, understated, necessary. Lily came up beside her and whispered, I think she hears you. Claire nodded. I hope so. They left the room quietly. In the hallway, Claire stopped and turned to Ben. I've spent years pretending my past didn't matter, she said. That the roof never leaked, that I never walked to school in hand-me-down shoes. I buried it all under meetings and mergers and clean lines. Ben met her gaze, his eyes steady. Sometimes surviving teaches you how to forget. But remembering, that's how we build something better. Claire looked away, blinking too fast. Why are the things we run from always the ones waiting for us when we stop? He gave a small smile. Because they know we'll circle back eventually. The ride back to Ben's house was quiet, but not empty. Lily napped in the back seat, curled up with the shoebox of sneakers between her arms like a treasure chest. The rain continued to tap lightly on the windshield, steady and familiar. Claire rode up front, hands folded in her lap. You're not what I expected, she said suddenly. Ben raised an eyebrow. How's that? I thought you'd be harder. More guarded. Most people with your history are, he shrugged. Used to be. After Anna died, I put up walls. Not as polished as yours, more like plywood and duct tape. But still, walls. What changed? He glanced in the rearview mirror at Lily sleeping peacefully. Someone showed up in the rain, he said. Didn't ask for permission. Just needed someone. Claire smiled faintly. She does that, doesn't she? Yeah. Silence again. Then Claire asked, Do you believe in fate? Ben considered. I believe in choices. But sometimes the road curves just right. And when you're paying attention, you notice the turns that matter. She nodded slowly. I think I missed a lot of those turns. He turned to her for a moment. You didn't miss this one. That night, Ben sat on the porch of his modest home watching Lily draw in chalk on the driveway. She was barefoot, her red sneakers drying in the mudroom. Claire sat beside him, a cup of tea in her hands. Your house is nothing like mine, she said softly. Too messy, he asked, teasing. No, it's lived in. He chuckled. Well, life's loud here. Doors slam, pancakes burn, socks go missing. But it's real. Claire looked at him, her expression open, vulnerable. You've built something that matters, Ben, even if you don't see it. He looked at her, and for the first time saw not the CEO, not the woman in heels and tailored blazers, but the little girl who had cried in a snow-damp room and held tightly to a pair of red sneakers like a lifeline. I see it now, he said, because you reminded me too. They sat there as dusk fell, the rain finally easing. The clouds drifted like memories, heavy but moving on. Inside the house, Lily came bounding up to the porch chalk dust on her fingers. I'm making a banner for the campaign, she announced proudly. But I need a slogan. Claire tilted her head. I thought it was, because I care. That's the name, Lily grinned. But I want something more, something to shout. Ben leaned back in his chair and looked up at the sky, now freckled with the first stars. How about, he said slowly, let kindness echo. Lily beamed. Yes, she turned and ran inside to write it down, leaving Claire and Ben alone in the warm evening air. Let kindness echo, Claire repeated. That sounds like something worth shouting. Ben nodded. It's what got us here, isn't it? Claire turned to him. And maybe it's what gets us where we're meant to go. They sat in silence again, not because there was nothing to say, but because sometimes the most honest words are the ones left unspoken. The wind picked up just enough to rattle the porch chimes as Ben leaned over the fence, hammering in a new slat that had come loose during the last storm. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon, one of those soft golden days where time felt like it moved a little slower, like it knew the people beneath it needed room to breathe. Inside, Lily was at the kitchen table, crayons scattered in every direction, working on poster drafts for the upcoming fundraiser. Every few minutes, her voice floated through the screen door. Ben, do you think blue or green looks more hopeful? Ben, how do you spell resilient? Ben, do you think I can ask the mayor to come? Each time Ben smiled. He didn't always answer right away. Sometimes he just paused, let the sound of her fill the quiet. He hadn't realized how much he'd missed the noise of someone believing in something. From the sidewalk, Claire approached, slowly holding a bundle of folded flyers and a cardboard mock-up of the event stage. She looked almost casual, jeans, sneakers, a soft blue sweater, but there was still a tension in her shoulders that hadn't quite melted, even after everything. Years of keeping it all together didn't unravel in a week. Ben noticed, and didn't comment. You sure this is the right place for the press preview? She asked, nodding toward his front yard. He set down his hammer. We've got the picket fence. That's got to count for something. Claire smiled. It counts for everything. They stepped inside, and Lily jumped up like a firecracker. You're here, Claire laughed. I wouldn't miss it. She handed Lily a flyer freshly printed. Across the top in bold letters, because I care, one voice. Many hearts. Beneath it, a photo of Lily, smiling, arms crossed, red sneakers visible below the hem of her jeans. Lily stared at it like it was magic. I look real, she whispered. Claire crouched beside her. You are real, and you're the reason people are going to show up next week, not for pity, but because you're proof that hope still walks among us. Ben watched the exchange quietly. He could see it clearly now, how Lily pulled people into her gravity without even meaning to. How Claire, once a fortress of steel, now knelt beside a child with eyes full of light and arms full of crayons. There was a kind of symmetry in the room that day, and it stirred something old and quiet in him. Later that afternoon, they all drove to the community center, where the first public workshop for the fundraiser would be held. Claire had arranged a space for families to share their stories, open mic style, with Lily, set to speak first. The turnout surprised them. Dozens of people showed up. Mothers with strollers, veterans with old medals, teens with camera phones. They came not just for Lily, but for the feeling she'd ignited, that one person's courage might just give someone else permission to stand up too. Ben stood at the back, arms crossed, as Lily stepped onto the low wooden stage in her familiar red sneakers, now cleaned, polished, and shining like they understood the moment. She adjusted the microphone, looked out. "My name is Lily," she began, voice shaking just slightly. "I'm 10 years old. My mom is sick, and I used to think I was too small to help her." She paused, swallowed. "But then I met people who showed me that kindness doesn't have to be big. It just has to be real. Someone gave my mom a second chance. Someone gave me a ride in the rain. Someone believed in me before I believed in myself." Claire wiped the corner of her eye. Ben didn't move, but his jaw clenched. Lily finished. "I'm here because I care. And if you're here too, maybe you care about someone. Or maybe you just need to be reminded that someone cares about you. Either way, welcome." The room erupted into applause, some standing, others crying, but all united by the quiet thunder of a child who had found her voice. After the event, Claire and Ben stood in the hallway as volunteers packed up. Lily ran between them, too full of energy to sit still. "I never thought I'd say this," Claire said, "but I think that little girl might be the best business partner I've ever had." Ben chuckled. "She comes with crayons instead of contracts, but yeah, I see your point." They stood quietly for a moment watching her. Claire turned to him. "You know, I've had a lot of full-circle moments lately, but today felt like the biggest." "How so?" 20 years ago, a stranger fixed my roof, handed me a pair of red sneakers, and disappeared. I built everything I have on that act of kindness. I didn't know his name. I never thought I'd get to say thank you." She looked at him, voice softer. "Until I knocked on your window." Ben shifted. "I didn't do it expecting anything back." "I know. That's what made it real." She hesitated, then added, "You ever think maybe kindness isn't meant to come full circle? Maybe it's meant to ripple forward. Like echoes." He nodded slowly. "Yeah. But sometimes it circles back at exactly the moment we need to believe in it again." Claire smiled. "Then I guess I'm glad you picked up that little girl in the rain." Ben looked down the hallway at Lily, now showing an elderly couple how to fold a paper heart. "So am I." That night, as they drove home, Lily dozed in the back seat, holding a handmade "Because I Care" button like a medal. Claire rode shotgun, her head leaning against the window. "You know," she said quietly, "my mother once told me that the best things in life are never planned. They're just answered." Ben glanced at her. "What do you mean?" "I mean, sometimes life knocks, and we're too busy to hear it. But every now and then, we do. And we open the door." He smiled. "And on the other side is a soaking wet kid in red sneakers." She laughed, tired and full. "Exactly." The rain returned lightly as they pulled into Ben's driveway, but this time it didn't feel heavy. It felt like grace. The walls of room 212 hadn't changed. The same off-white paint, the same scent of antiseptic and lavender lotion in the corners. The beeping of monitors steady as breath. But something in the room felt different that morning. Lighter, quieter, like the hush right before a sunrise. Lily stood at the foot of her mother's bed, holding a small card between her fingers. Her hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, her red sneakers bright against the floor. Claire stood beside her, hands clasped loosely in front of her, while Ben leaned against the wall by the window, arms crossed. His gaze anchored gently on the woman lying still under the blankets. "Hi, Mom," Lily said softly. "I brought some things to show you." Her voice didn't shake this time. There was no fear in it, only hope steady and rooted. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a folded flyer from the campaign. On the front, her own picture smiled back up at her. "That's me. The fundraiser is real. They used my words and my drawing, and next week I get to speak on a stage. I even get to wear a little microphone like a pop star." She giggled shyly, then quickly sobered. "Ben helped me get there. And Ms. Claire, she's the one who made it happen. She runs the big building I told you about. She used to be like us. And she remembers everything." Claire stepped closer. "I remember a day when my mom was too tired to stand, too scared to ask for help. And I remember the sound of hammering above my head, because someone decided we were worth helping, no matter how small we seemed." Ben said nothing, but his eyes dropped, humbled. "She's the reason I kept these," Claire added, pulling a small box from her purse. She opened it slowly. Inside were the red sneakers, clean preserved but softened by time. Lily took her mother's hand and placed the card in her palm. It was hand-drawn with crooked hearts and a sentence in purple marker. "Mom, I'm not just surviving, I'm becoming." Then, without warning, her mother stirred. It wasn't much, a small shift of her head, a fluttering of her eyelids, but it was enough to make Lily gasp, enough to make Claire step back in reverence, and enough to make Ben straighten from the wall like a man called back to attention. The nurse rushed in moments later, called by the alert system that registered movement. "She's responding," the nurse said, astonished. "That's the most activity we've seen in a week." Lily leaned forward. "Mom, it's me. I'm here." There was no answer, but her mother's fingers twitched faintly in response. Claire placed a hand on Ben's arm, her voice low. She heard her. Ben nodded his chest, too tight for words. They returned to the room every day that week. Claire came during her lunch breaks, always with tea and fresh flowers. Ben came in the evenings, sometimes fixing the loose curtain rod or replacing the squeaky hinge on the bathroom door without being asked. Lily, of course, was always there, her voice bright, her drawings pinned on every corner of the room. By Thursday, her mother was awake. Not fully, her words were few and slurred, but her eyes followed Lily's every move, and she smiled when Ben made a dry joke about hospital jello being an insult to real fruit. Claire stayed later that night. The others had gone home, and the nurses had dimmed the lights. She pulled a chair next to the bed and sat quietly. "I never thought I'd find my way back here," she whispered. "Not just a hospital, but this place in my heart where things are allowed to matter again." Lily's mother blinked slowly as if understanding. Claire reached into her bag and pulled out the old sneakers once more. "I kept these because I thought they reminded me of who I used to be. But I was wrong. They remind me of who I was, always meant to become." She placed the sneakers on the table next to the hospital ID wristband and the fresh lilies from Ben's garden. "Thank you," she whispered, "for raising her, for teaching her to walk into storms, and for letting me remember how to walk out of mine." The next day, Lily's mother spoke her daughter's name out loud for the first time in weeks, and Lily cried. Not the way a child cries from pain, but the way a soul overflows when the one thing it was waiting for finally arrives. Ben was there. Claire, too. All three of them like compass points around a single fragile flame protecting it from the wind. On Sunday, just 2 days before the fundraiser, Lily found Ben outside by the garden, tending to a set of repotted daisies. "Can I ask you something?" she said, brushing dirt from her hands. "Of course." "What do you do when you're scared of what comes next?" Ben thought for a long moment. Then he set down the trowel and wiped his hands on his jeans. "I look around," he said, "at who's standing beside me. And I remember that whatever's next, I don't have to face it alone." Lily nodded as if tucking the answer somewhere safe. Then she grinned. Good. Because I might faint during my speech. Ben chuckled. You won't. But if you do just fall forward, it means you're still moving. That evening, Claire sat at her desk, watching the final edit of the campaign video. Lily's voice narrated over images of families' old photographs and candid moments of joy and pain. We don't need to be loud to matter. We just need to show up for each other, even when it's raining, especially then. Claire closed her laptop heart full. Some storms leave behind damage. Others leave behind growth. And a few rare ones like this leave behind family. The morning of the campaign launch began with sunlight spilling through the clouds like a promise kept. After weeks of gray skies and quiet prayers, the sun had returned, not in a showy blaze, but a gentle golden glow that made everything look softer, more possible. At the town square, volunteers in navy t-shirts moved briskly between booths, stringing up banners that fluttered in the breeze. Folded chairs were arranged in neat rows, and a small stage hand-built by Ben himself stood proudly in the center, trimmed with garlands of fresh wildflowers. Across the front of the stage in white letters, painted by Lily's own hand, read the words, "Because I care." It was more than a slogan now. It was a movement. Backstage, Lily paced in her new sneakers, still red, but now stitched with her name inside the tongue and a tiny embroidered heart on the heel. A gift from Claire. The old pair sat in her backpack, never far from reach. Ben knelt beside the soundboard, adjusting the levels. He looked up just in time to see her blowing out a breath like a miniature dragon. Nervous, he asked. She nodded. A little. But also ready. That's a good combination. Claire stepped up behind them, wearing a casual blazer, and jeans her usual armor traded in for something more human. She placed a hand on Lily's shoulder. Remember, you're not performing, she said. You're just telling the truth. And the truth doesn't need to be polished. It just needs to be real. Lily smiled. Like my drawings. Exactly, Claire said. Messy but full of heart. Ben rose, brushing sawdust from his hands. They're starting to arrive. Claire peeked around the curtain. A growing crowd filled the square families with lawn chairs, kids in strollers, elderly couples, arm in arm. The mayor was there, and local business owners, reporters from the regional news. And at the very back, in a wheelchair, shaded by a wide-brimmed hat, sat Lily's mother, eyes bright cheeks, pale but warm. Beside her stood a nurse, and next to them, a bouquet of daisies tied with a red ribbon. Claire's breath caught at the sight. She made it, she whispered. Ben nodded, blinking hard. She wasn't going to miss this. The MC welcomed everyone, and the event began. Videos played on the screen behind the stage, testimonials from other families, old clips of community events, footage of Ben building a swing set for the school playground. There was laughter, applause, and more than a few tears. And then it was time. Lily stepped onto the stage. The crowd quieted instantly. She stood at the center, clutching a microphone that seemed to weigh more than it should, but her shoulders were square and her chin lifted. Hi, she said, her voice small but clear. My name is Lily. I'm 10, and I'm here today because I care. She paused, looking down at her shoes for a heartbeat. Then she smiled. I care about my mom. She's sick, but she's fighting. I care about people who feel small. I used to feel that way too, until someone gave me a ride on a rainy day, and everything started to change. She turned slightly, as if remembering. Ms. Claire taught me that my story matters. Mr. Ben showed me that real heroes don't wear capes. They wear work boots and carry toolboxes. And my mom, she taught me that love doesn't stop when things get hard. It gets louder. She held up a piece of her sketchbook. It showed 3 stick figures, one tall, with long hair, one with a beard and a hammer, and one in red shoes holding a heart. Above it, kindness echoes. "I don't know what happens next," she said, "but I know I'm not alone. And if you're here, maybe you felt alone too. So, this is me saying you're not. You matter. And your story's not done yet." The silence after her words was full, not empty. And then slowly the clapping began. Not polite, not perfunctory, real. Claire stood at the side of the stage, her hand over her mouth. Ben stood beside her, arms crossed, his heart so full it ached. When Lily returned backstage, she was trembling. Ben knelt beside her. "You were brave." Lily looked up at him. "I remembered what you said, about falling forward." He smiled. "You flew." Later that day, the donation board overflowed. Over $75,000 raised in a single afternoon, enough to cover treatment, enough to support other families, enough to prove that kindness, when amplified, didn't just echo, it roared. Claire stepped onto the stage for closing remarks. She didn't hold a script. "I built a company from ambition," she began. But I forgot what ambition is for. I forgot that success isn't measured in square footage or quarterly growth. It's measured in impact, in people. She looked toward Lily. And today a little girl with more heart than most adults reminded me that real power comes from telling the truth, from caring deeply, from not being afraid to show up. She paused, then added, "This campaign isn't about saving one person. It's about remembering that saving one person saves all of us, because their story ripples outward. It makes us better." She stepped off stage to a standing ovation. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and fairy lights blinked to life around the stage, Ben found Claire sitting on a bench near the playground, her shoes off her toes in the grass. He sat beside her, a bottle of iced tea in hand. "Long day," she said. "Good day," he replied. She looked over at him. "I don't know what comes next. For me. For this." Ben didn't answer right away. He just looked out at Lily laughing with other kids, her mother watching nearby, alive and smiling. "Maybe it doesn't matter what comes next," he said. "Maybe what matters is what comes back." Claire turned to him, brow raised. "Back," he nodded. "Like the kindness you gave once, the help you didn't know someone needed, the red sneakers in a shoebox." She smiled, slow and warm. Ben offered her the iced tea. She took it, her fingers brushing his. Neither of them moved away. And for the first time in years, Claire Delaney didn't feel like she was leading the world. She felt like she was home. The house was quiet, not with loneliness, but with peace. Sunlight spilled across the kitchen table, where Lily sat, humming softly, as she sorted a box of buttons and ribbons. On the counter nearby sat her old red sneakers, cleaned for the last time, their soles worn, smooth, their frayed laces tied in a perfect bow. She wasn't wearing them anymore. Her new ones, the gifted pair stitched with her name and heart, were sitting neatly by the door, drying from the morning dew. But she kept the old ones close, not to use, but to remember. From the hallway, the soft squeak of the floorboards signaled Ben's approach. He walked in with a steaming mug of tea in one hand, his other hand holding a small wooden shelf, freshly sanded and finished with a light stain. "I made something," he said. Lily perked up. "Is it for the sneakers?" He nodded, setting it down gently on the windowsill above the kitchen sink. It was simple, just 2 brackets and a narrow ledge, but carved along the front in soft, cursive were the words, "This is where we began." Lily was quiet for a moment, then stepped forward and placed the sneakers on the shelf. Not with ceremony, but with care, like tucking away a part of herself that had done its job and now needed to rest. "They're not retiring," she said seriously. "They're just watching over what's next." Ben smiled. Exactly. Upstairs, Claire sat on the edge of the hospital bed, now tucked into the guest room. Lily's mother, Melissa, was propped up on soft pillows, her coloring slowly returning her eyes brighter with each passing day. Claire had stopped calling it checking in. Now she called it visiting. Staying sometimes. Being part of the day, not just a guest in it. She read aloud from the newspaper, her voice calm and sure. Because I Care campaign raises $120,000 and counting, led by 10-year-old Lily Ross and a single dad who stopped during a storm. Melissa chuckled, soft and tired, but alive. That title makes it sound like a fable. Claire folded the paper. Maybe it is. But sometimes fables are the only way to tell the truth. People forget. Melissa looked at her for a long moment. You know, I don't remember much from when I was unconscious, but I remember a voice. Claire tilted her head. What did it say? Melissa's smile was faint, but real. It said, "She's becoming." Claire blinked. That was Lily's card, I know Melissa said. But I heard it, like someone speaking from the place between dreaming and waking. Claire reached out, squeezed her hand. You raised someone remarkable. She raised me back, Melissa whispered. That evening, as twilight settled in and fireflies flickered along the edges of the garden, Ben grilled dinner on the back patio. Claire stood beside him, 2 glasses of lemonade in hand. I was thinking, she said casually, about adding a Voices of the Community segment to the campaign's website. Long-form stories, maybe even a podcast. Ben flipped the salmon with practiced ease. And you want me to host it? She laughed. No, but I want you to build the booth where we record. He nodded thoughtfully. I can do that. You always say that, Claire said, smiling, because it's always true. She studied him a moment. Do you ever do things for yourself? Ben paused, then glanced at her. Sometimes helping someone else is the only way I remember who I am. Claire nodded. She understood that more than she ever had. Then gently she added, I hope you know. I want to be part of whatever's next for you. Not as a thank you, but as a beginning. He looked at her. Really looked. I was hoping you'd say that. Later, after dinner, and dishes, and one too many rounds of Go Fish. Lily tiptoed into her room, carrying a new pair of red sneakers Claire had bought her for school. She opened her closet and placed them carefully beside the old ones on the shelf. Then she took a small piece of paper and wrote in big block letters, for whoever needs to start again. She taped it gently to the edge of the shelf, just below the old shoes. Because someday, maybe not soon, but someday, someone else would walk into their lives, cold, wet, a little lost. And those shoes would be waiting, not to be worn, but to remind them that new paths always start where courage first stood. In the living room, Ben and Claire sat side by side on the couch, a light quilt draped over their laps, their hands slowly finding each other in the quiet. No declarations, no grand gestures, just the hum of a home rebuilt from kindness. One act, one day, one red sneaker at a time. It rained again. Not a storm. Not the kind that sends people hurrying indoors or reminds them of things left unfinished. No, this was a soft, steady rain, the kind that brings new life to dry roots, that seeps gently into the soil and whispers you can begin again. Claire stood by the front window, watching as the drops traced lazy patterns down the glass. She held a mug of chamomile tea in her hands, wearing one of Ben's flannel shirts over her dress slacks, like it belonged there. Outside, the world looked washed clean. Behind her, the sounds of life moved quietly through the house. Lily's laughter floated down the hall from the room where she was helping her mother fold laundry. Melissa's strength returning day by day. The smell of cinnamon bread baking filled the air, and from the back of the house came the occasional rhythmic tap of hammer on wood. Ben in his element. Claire took a sip of tea and smiled. It had been 6 months since that first ride in the rain. 6 months since a girl with red sneakers and a handwritten sign had stood on the side of a highway and cracked open the walls Claire had spent years building around her heart. She had thought she knew what love was, what purpose was, what legacy meant. She hadn't. But she did now. The campaign had grown beyond what anyone imagined. What began as a one-day fundraiser had become a foundation. Because I Care with weekly community events, micro grants for families in crisis, and a youth mentorship program with Lily as the honorary junior director. Lily still wore red sneakers, new ones now, but always red. She said they helped her walk like she had a story to tell. And she did. Ben had built more than just the stage and booths. He'd built benches for the town square, a new reading corner at the library, a food pantry drop box outside the clinic. And he was still building quietly, steadily like always. But now people saw him. Now he was part of something that echoed. And Claire had given up 2 of her corporate advisory boards, not out of burnout, but clarity. She'd traded skyscraper meetings for school visits, boardroom keynotes, for conversations in church basements and farmers' markets. And she had stayed. Here, that afternoon, Lily burst into the living room with a bright pink umbrella and a mischievous grin. "It's time," she declared. Claire turned. "Time for what?" "For the walk," Lily said, grabbing her hand. "Ben said we have to go see the tree." Claire laughed. "In the rain." "That's the best time," Ben said, appearing behind her, with his coat already zipped and his hand outstretched. She looked at them, both eyes narrowing with mock suspicion. "You two planned this." "We did," Lily said proudly. "Come on. You'll understand when you see it." They walked the familiar path behind the house, down the gravel lane, past the wildflowers just beginning to bloom again, and into the clearing where the old maple tree stood. Ben had brought Claire here once, months ago, when the leaves had been heavy with gold and time felt slower. She remembered thinking then that the tree looked like it had weathered everything. Now in spring, it looked different. Reborn. At the base of the trunk, something new had been added, a small wooden sign staked into the soil. Claire stepped forward and read the words carved into the plaque. "This is where it rained. This is where it began." Her breath caught. She turned to Ben, her eyes shimmering. "You did this?" He nodded, hands in his pockets, his smile small but sure. It felt right. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Lily ran a few loops around the tree arms out like wings. I told him it needed a marker. Not for tourists, for us. So we never forget the good kind of rain. Claire stared up through the branches. The drizzle tapped gently on the leaves above, dripping down like a benediction. "I used to think rain meant something was ending," she said quietly. "Now I think it means something's being made ready." Ben stepped closer, brushing her hand with his. "You were ready. You just didn't know it yet." She looked at him, then at Lily, who was now lying in the grass, catching drops on her tongue. "What are we even building here?" she asked. He tilted his head thoughtfully. "A life. One kindness at a time." That night, back at the house, Lily carefully placed a new envelope beside the red sneakers on the shelf. It was sealed with "For later," written in blocky letters across the front. When Claire asked about it, Lily shrugged. "It's for someone who needs it. Maybe me. Maybe someone who hasn't shown up yet." Inside the envelope, though no one knew it yet, was a drawing of the tree in the rain, and beneath it a single sentence. "It rained once, and then everything grew." Ben turned off the porch light, locking the front door. He walked into the living room where Claire sat, curled up with a book and gently kissed her temple. "You ever think about that day?" she asked without looking up. "Every day," he said. "Do you ever wish you just kept driving?" He smiled. "Not even once." She reached for his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "It's still raining," she murmured. Ben looked out the window. "Yeah. But now we're not waiting it out." "No," Claire said, setting the book aside and turning to face him fully. "We're walking in it. Together." And they were. Not just surviving anymore, not rebuilding what was, but stepping into what could be with red sneakers on the shelf, a girl with stars in her eyes, and a future shaped by the quiet, powerful echo of kindness that had once begun on a rainy road. Sometimes it just takes a red pair of shoes, a quiet act of kindness, and the courage to stop when others keep driving. If this story touched your heart, we'd love to hear from you. Tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? We read every message, and it truly means more than you know. And if you'd like to keep walking alongside us through more stories of healing, hope, and human connection, feel free to subscribe. There's always a seat here for you. Thank you truly for spending your time with us today. Until next time, stay kind, stay open, and never underestimate the light you bring to someone else's storm.